Howdy, Smyth Beetle Ute builders. Short video on bed spacers. It gets mentioned here and there, but nobody really talks about it, and it can be a pain in the hiney to get those spacers in so that when you bolt your bed down, it's in the right place. So I'm going to show you a couple of the techniques I used. You could try those, or maybe it'll spark interest, spark an idea for another technique. The spacers I'm talking about are the ones that go between the bed and the steel down here at the bottom underneath those side support rails. So my technique is get the bed centered, get the back bolts in, then I put the front, get the front riveted in, and then I start messing with those bolts. I would do those bolts before you put any of these side, the flying buttress or this top of the wheel arch brace in. You may have to kind of shift the bed a little bit just to get the spacers in there. It all depends on your car, how big a spacer you're going to need. And they are definitely different between the front and the back. So there's two on each side, left and right. The front one, there's a slight bulge in the steel in that wheel arch. So it's usually very little spacer you need, sometimes none at all. So for that, I usually stack up a couple of the washers that come with the kit. Just to make life easier for getting them in, I just wrap them with a little bit of electrical tape or masking tape. This is typical blue painter's tape. And then just take a straight edge and trim that edge so that it'll fit in where I need. How do you figure out how much spacer you need? You can usually look down in that crack and you can see it, but that doesn't give you any measurement. So my technique is, I've got them drilled already, I got the bed centered where I want it. I'll take a pick, or you could use a drill bit or a toothpick or a Q-tip maybe, and I stick it in that hole until I hit the aluminum on the other side. And if you need to, you can look down through here to make sure that you're hitting the aluminum and not going through the hole, and you'll have too big a measurement. Put my finger on it and pull it back out, and now I know, okay, that's how much spacer I need. Well, look at that. That is just about even with 3 washers. So tape 3 washers together, and now I've got my spacer. Now, remember, you have to subtract the thickness of that steel, which is about 1 washer from the washers that come with the kit. This back one requires a bigger spacer because it doesn't have that bulge in the steel there. And if you see one, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of times I find that the seat belt bolts that you take off that have that spacer on them, that spacer is just about right. And if you had to, you could take a little bit off of that on a grinding wheel or put it in the vise and take a little bit off with an angle grinder, whatever you need. Just try to keep it flat as close as you can. Not super critical, but try to keep it flat and not put an angle on it. But that's a fantastic spacer. So, seatbelt bolts from the back seat. One technique I've used plenty of times is tape it on a string. And now I can drop that down in there, and if you get it close enough where you can see it through the hole, then you can get the pick and you can pull it down and get it centered up on that hole. Pull the pick out, stick the bolt through. Now you can jerk the string and it'll pull right through the tape so there's not string down in there. Sometimes you need to give it a little bit of push. You can't quite just get it to drop. So I have this tool, which works great for reaching in there and just pushing up, down, helping me get it in place. But if you don't have one of those, maybe you got a big screwdriver, that'll work. A pry bar doesn't work very well because it's too big with that angle on it to slide it up in there. I've used an aluminum ruler or a yardstick, but probably everybody's got a paint stick laying around. And this works pretty well. And you can get both of them with a standard paint stick. It's a little bit tricky for that front one, but you can just reach it to push that down, get that into place, get the bolt through it, and then pop that tape off. Another technique that can work is using a telescoping magnet. You got to come in from the top here, and sometimes you have to come from the back, work it underneath this lip, and then slide it forward, because the gap gets smaller towards the top, so you can't always come straight down. Sometimes you have to drop it here and then drag it forward. Be careful when you're choosing your magnet. I have different sizes, and you can see this one is too big. It won't fit in there. It's wider than my spacer, so I have to use this little one. That one works out pretty well for me, and if I need to, I can help it along with the paint stick. So that works pretty well. Then once you get your bolt through it, you're set. You just put the nut on and everything's golden. So that can be a headache, particularly if you were very careful trimming and you have very little gap right here. But what you can do is you could just pull that steel and you could bend it up and give you a little room to work with. And then if you want, you could tap that back down into place. Just don't let it touch the aluminum, or you'll end up with a vibration and it'll start eating into the aluminum over time. So I wouldn't let that steel touch the aluminum. But if you trimmed it a little bit long, you can just bend it back with your fingers. Just of course be careful that you're not cutting your fingers on a sharp edge there. Gives you a little more room. Of course, a light that you can kind of shine down in there, that helps. Sometimes you can put it inside the bed underneath, and then you can see it. Probably, yeah, there you can just see the light down right there. And actually you can see the spacer that I put in just barely down there, right about there. You can see the spacer I've already put in. So a little light is very handy also. Besides making sure that the bed is in the right place, it's important to get the spacers correct so that when you bolt your floor down, it's even with the sidewall, just to make it look good. If your spacer is too small, obviously when you crank that bolt down, you're gonna pull this bed wall out a little bit, and then when your floor is laying in there, you'll see this bow in it. Right, the edge of the floor is very telling because it's a nice, hard, straight edge, but it will show all your errors if you don't have enough spacer and you crank that down and you've pulled that bed wall out. You can, while you're working on this, you can set the bed wall or the bed floor in. It makes a great square for helping you to keep the whole bed square as you're getting ready to bolt it in. It's easy to just slide it in quick, check it, see those edges. It's basically a giant square, right? It's actually a rectangle, but it helps you square up the bed. So don't forget you have that tool that comes with the kit. You can play with those ideas. I'm sure you can get it done and you're gonna build a fantastic ute. I wish you all the best of luck. Like and subscribe, and thank you for your continued support.